Good day everyone. Today we'll be taking a look at the Portuguese Gran Columbia Revolution, aka the revolution that turns all of your citizens into musketeers. And not just any musketeers, but musketeers that move a bit slower but have more health. These musketeers are called Independence Guard. They cost as much as a normal musketeer, they only take up one pop, and they can take a lot of punishment. The Portuguese Gran Columbia Revolution automatically sends to ironclads if you're on a water map. It also turns all of your citizens into Independence Guard. This is useful for the Portuguese because the Portuguese are a civilization that relies upon delivering long-range firepower. However, a lot of their units that are capable of this are very micro-heavy, which is where your Independence Guard come in because they are a nice little meat shield that you don't have to micromanage to constantly keep alive. With this revolution, you also have the option to send Simon Bolivar, which will also help to keep your units alive because he will increase the HP of all units in his vicinity by around 5%, which doesn't sound like much, but 5% can be the difference between a unit being taken out in one hit by cannon fire and a unit staying alive for 2 shots, which will buy your guns the valuable time that they need to take out the enemy artillery. The Portuguese don't always spam musketeers, because vis-a-vis the musketeers you'd find with, say, the British or the Japanese Ashigaro, or even the Ottomans' Janissaries, the Portuguese musketeer will be at a disadvantage. For this reason, Portuguese players rarely create them, which creates a huge hole in their roster. This revolution helps to correct that hole in the roster by instantly giving you a large force of musketeers because they can be your front line and take most of the enemy damage, while your longer range units, such as your organ guns or your Caçadores or your culverins or any of your other long range units, which have slightly less health than the beefy Independence Guard, can do the real damage. All of the Portuguese revolutions excel in some way, and this revolution is no exception because it fulfills a large hole sitting inside the Portuguese roster. Normally, Portuguese players completely abandon the musketeer in favor of a goon and skirmisher combo, with maybe some artillery mixed in, but when you just go for that combo, as effective as it is, something is lost. Your army becomes heavily dependent on micro. So if you look away for half a second to go and see what your idle villager is up to, and in that half a second, the enemy Hazars have already killed all of your culverin, or the enemy has started to blast away at your skirmisher mass with falconets, or out of nowhere your dragoons are getting picked off by a giant mass of enemy skirmishers that you didn't see before. That's something that turns a lot of people off of the Portuguese. That blink and you miss it moment where you were off your micro game for half a second, and now half of your powerful but low health units are now dead. With the Independence Guard, you're allowed that moment to breathe, you're allowed that moment to look away, because the Independence Guard can act as the bullet sponges for your glass cannon type units like your Caçadores. Another weakness of the Portuguese is that they lacked an intermediate siege option, i.e. their grenadiers aren't that good, so they don't have a lot of great options when it comes to sieging down buildings, since the siege damage done by your organ guns and your Caçadores and your goons leaves a little bit to be desired. That is one situation where your Independence Guard comes in handy, because they might not have that same sort of siege speciality as hand infantry or grenadiers, but in a large mass, you can now take out the odd tower with ease. So you no longer have that light panic moment where you have to quickly micro your mortars to wipe out all of the watchtowers in the enemy base before they take out your light infantry. Instead, you can simply peel off a small group of musketeers, have them attack the towers so that they'll draw aggro from the towers, and soak up that damage while sieging the towers down. Or if there's the odd building that you want to destroy but you don't want to waste mortar time on, like say a house or a stable, artillery, the kind of buildings that your enemy has a lot of and you still want to destroy but it's not really worth focusing down on, then you can just peel off a few musketeers and have each of them take down a few houses or whatever other building you're trying to target, so that your slower moving artillery can focus down on the targets that really matter, like the enemy's factories or the enemy's town centers. Musketeers give you the break you need. You aren't panicking when you're invading an enemy town because you don't have to hyperfixate on which target your mortars will attack first, nor do you have to worry about looking away for a second and having your entire force wiped out, because your musketeers can soak up that incoming damage. Now let's take a look at the cards. First things first, you have the card that gives you some Lanneros. Now this card also lets you build them from stables and forts and such. Then you have another card that gives you some Lanneros and some cattle, followed by the Infinite Gatling card, your Ironclads card, your Infinite Fort card, your Citizenship card, and then you have your Mercenary card, and a card that sends Salmon Bolt. Your Lanneros are basically cowboys that are armed with a lance instead of a pistol, so they act as a super cheap lancer unit, which can take out enemy infantry and artillery, making them quite useful, since they're a fast-moving, hard-hitting force. Additionally, though most players don't send you mercenary shipment, if you choose to send that mercenary shipment, it will give you 2 Highlanders, 2 Jaegers, and then 3 Harquebusiers. All for no gold cost, which is not bad at all. Most players who go the Gran Columbia Revolution, however, will simply focus on the musketeer spam and may have some Lanneros nearby just to deal with any enemy falconets or any massive skirmishers that's hiding behind buildings. The Gran Columbia Revolution pairs quite well with the high damage ranged units that you'll already be using as Portugal, such as your goon type units, or your skirmishers, or your artillery, with your Independence Guard acting as the previously mentioned sacrificial lambs. Well, they also have the ability to help siege down buildings, letting you take damage from afar, and also having that intermediate siege roll, where if there's a building that's bothering you, or if most of the enemy base has already been cleared out, then your giant Independence Guard mass can easily be turned against the enemy buildings, such as, say, the enemy's banks, which is always a neat little thing. As previously mentioned, the Gran Columbia Revolution does quite well with your Castadors, and if you really want, you can even decide to go for a Musketeer and Castador combo with only a small complement of Dragoons or melee infantry. The advantage of such a choice is that you don't have to worry about micromanaging as much. The only disadvantage of such a choice is that your Independence Guard with their slow movement speed aren't nearly as good at kiting the enemy as your Goon and Castadors would be. But most players ease off of the Goon and Castador constantly kiting combo after the Fortress Age, so you really aren't giving up that much by going for a Musk and Castador combo. The Gran Columbia Revolution is also a good revolution to do if your enemy catches you on the back foot. If they've decided to attack you faster than you thought you were, and you're in the Fortress Age but you don't have an army because it was a treaty game mode so you were focused on booming, then with the press of a button you can instantly create a force of musketeer. And the beefiness of your Independence Guard makes them an excellent tool for the defense, as they can either deal damage from afar behind walls, or you can charge them in to choke up a gap with their bodies. That said, you also want to have a force of Lanneros or other fast-moving cavalry, just for situations where speed is of the essence, so that you can have a strike force that can quickly engage and distract the enemy, while your giant army of Independence Guard, backed up by artillery and other units, takes a bit more time to actually reach the fight. That said, once they actually reach the fight, your musketeers will act as a very cost-effective unit. They're also pretty good against most general types of opponents that you'll find on the battlefield, so with most matchups, your Independence Guard will prove to be good. Not great, not terrible. Whereas with your normal, more specialized Portuguese units, if they get matched up across the wrong kind of thing, they're dead. Your culverins encounter any kind of cavalry, they're dead. Your Castador mass is caught out in the open, they're dead. You accidentally assume that your massive Dragoons is going to excel against enemy skirmishers, like say a Dutch player's skirmishers or mercenary Jaeger, and you forget that those units do bonus damage against your Dragoons, well, now they're dead too. Whereas with the Independence Guard, since they have that nice little pot of health, you can expect them to last a hot minute. Even if they go against enemy skirmisher masses, it's going to take that skirmisher mass a while to cut through, which will buy you time to bring in your own organ guns or some other unit to deal with the situation. At the end of the day, as a Portuguese player who goes with the Gran Columbia Revolution, you're going to be okay. You have your Lannero to deal with enemy artillery or fast-moving units. You have your normal units, your Castadors, your Dragoons, your organ guns, to deal with the usual opponents that you'll go up against. So the Gran Columbia Revolution gives you more tools, it doesn't force any gimmicks on you, It doesn't make you have to micromanage some special unit that you can only train like 7 of, nor does it make you deal with something like a town center that's always spawning out infantry whether or not you want it to, or any kind of thing like that. The only real gimmick that it has is that it gives you access to the outlaw economy, and there are plenty of revolutions that do that, and at the end of the day, that's purely optional. You aren't forced to create a giant army of Lanneros to dunk on an Aztec player. You can if you want to, but you really don't have to. The Gran Columbia Revolution is the go-to revolution if you're on a naval map, since it will instantly send those two ironclads. However, its main strength is that it's a balanced revolution. It gives you musketeers, which are general purpose good against everything. It gives you Lanneros to help take down enemy artillery for super cheap since all they cost is food, no gold cost. And all of these units have excellent synergy with the Portuguese units that you already have on the table. You're basically getting musketeers that can take a punch, just like British musketeers. The Gran Columbia Revolution is basically the easy mode revolution. It's the revolution I would recommend to anyone who's just getting into revolutions for the Portuguese. So go out there, have fun, and protect your organ guns with musketeers.